Google updates its travel search interface for mobile. Google also now supports JSON-LD for reviews and products. And it's now 3.57 degrees of separation, no longer 6 degrees. All that and more in This Week in Organic, episode number 34.
This Week's in Organic. Live from London on thisweekinorganic.com.
Broadcasting live on the interwebs, you're watching This Week in Organic, the weekly show that debates the ramifications of the latest SEO and content marketing news. Sign up to watch the next show live at thisweekinorganic.com. Hello and welcome, I'm David Bain, and each week I'll be joined by some knowledgeable, opinionated folks to discuss the latest happenings and anything that impacts organic traffic. As for you in the live audience, get involved. Click on the tweet or the post buttons to your top left-hand side to share the show with your fellow listeners. And let us know what you think, of course, what's being discussed in the comment section to the right-hand side. But let's get have a meeting with our guests who have joined us today. Now, hopefully we might even have a couple of more guests joining us in a bit, but we've got a great guest to start off with, which is Matt Travis. Matt, how are you doing there?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah,
Very
good,
well
thank
indeed.
you. Good,
How
thank
are
you.
You good?
So you've taken a leisurely day at home to join us from your little home studio there. Thank you very much for doing that there. So we discussed a few topics beforehand, actually. So what
No worries.
what are the
at all.
topics that we were talking about that particularly interest you?
There was a couple really from the list that really sort of stood out. One was the JSON-LD, the support that it's now offering for products and reviews, which looks really cool. But also the article that chap wrote on some of the SEO myths that just won't die. I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Are you a man that believes in SEO myths, or are myths a thing of the past?
Well, I think it's all a bit subjective, isn't it? Everyone's got a differing opinion, and I think realistically, the only way you can really tell is through experience and trial and error. And coming from an agency background, it's really interesting to see that what works for one client in one particular vertical might not work for another in a different market. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is experience.
Absolutely. So just before we get started completely, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you in terms of where you're from, and maybe a little bit about what your background is in general digital and SEO?
Yeah, no worries. So been in the marketing industry for about 10 years, working, both in-house, but also had really nice opportunity to work agency side as well. I would say probably a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to kind of digital marketing. But two of the areas that I love would be SEO, and I'm a bit of a self-confessed paid search geek. Actually, if I had to choose one, it would probably be PPC. But you have to.
We'll have to kick you off here and have no guests. No. So we're going to be talking about obviously mostly organic today. Starting off with the fact that Google have recently released an update to its travel search interface for mobile. If you search for a travel-related destination, you're now much more likely to go down Google's knowledge graph funnel. So what does this mean, I guess, for businesses in the travel industry sector? Because that's going to be potentially the big impact here initially. Should someone like TripAdvisor be really actually scared about this? What are your thoughts on that one, Matt?
Potentially. I mean, I did a couple of searches, and it seems like it's only really affecting kind of broad term stuff. So, things to do in Thailand, for instance. And then it doesn't seem to be affecting the really long tail stuff. And so from the outset, from an SEO point of view, there's probably going to be more competition among advertisers that are trying to optimize for these longer tail searches, I would have thought. So somebody like TripAdvisor, yes, they've probably got the in-house resource to be able to switch track and actually sort of change their SEO strategy to be able to cope with that. But I suppose smaller travel operators with much more limited budgets might struggle to make that change quickly.
Okay. You were for me, you were cutting out just a little bit there. Now, what we're actually doing to record you is we're using this little bit of software called Zencaster, which is a great thing that I've been trialing over the last couple of weeks. So that means that I've got your audio being recorded locally through your browser as well. So if anyone struggles to actually catch what either of us are saying, if I cut out or if you cut out, then that's a great reason to listen to the replay, because we should have the perfect audio quality in the replay. But with live, of course, you never know quite how it's going to go down. But it's always interesting, certainly when Google change the way that its SERP is displayed. And it's been a long time since you tended to see results just in the top 10 of search results, and that's it, with nothing else in there. You know, you started with images, with videos, and other rich elements in there as well now. But I guess the scary thing is that because there are so many elements like the knowledge graph and maps there initially now, before you get to any organic search results, and the fact that so many people are actually browsing the web on mobile devices now, it's actually almost off the screen, if not off the screen, before they actually get to standard, if there are any standard search results nowadays. Do you think that means that SEOs just can no longer think in the terms of simply getting a good organic listing? They've got to think of actually what Google are doing with rich data and actually trying to get their website listed somehow in the knowledge graph or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think anything that Google can do to prevent people from trying to manipulate its algorithm. But it's also interesting. Well, I'm just going to pop in a little paid search kind of query there. Obviously, it's rich media is appearing above the ads, right? So I looked at that and thought, well, hang on a minute. As an advertiser, should I be paying top whack for these keywords when Google's ranking itself above my ad? So I don't know, just a question I would throw in there, really. But yeah, in terms of the rich content, I guess Google's been moving towards microdata for a while now, getting webmasters to start enriching their pages with a higher quality data. But to be honest with you, I don't know just yet in terms of what an advertiser could do in order to put them in that space above with regards to that. The rich data. Oh, hello.
Okay, I'm still experiencing you cutting a little bit there, actually, but you know, it's we can certainly have a good conversation about this as well, though. And if anyone else watching actually fancies jumping in and being part of the conversation, feel free to jump in there as well. It would be good to have you in as well. But you mentioned paid search there as well. So do you find personally that even if you actually rank very highly for an organic term, that in general it is worthwhile actually bidding and appearing high in paid search for that particular same term as well?
Oh, could you just say that again, Dave?
So if you rank for number one for a certain term in organic, would you also want to pay for that term and rank in paid search as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I often look at it in the other way around. So if I can see that a keyword is converting really well for paid, then yeah, I would definitely want to be ranking well for that in organic. But looking at it your way around, so if you're ranking well for something organically, then with paid search you don't just get the ability to be on the front page of Google Search. Obviously, they've now got their search partners, and they've been broadening the search network, as it were. So actually, you can think, well, is it worth bidding for that keyword and appearing on something like, getting your ads on YouTube, for instance, the display network? So yeah, potentially, I think it could be. Obviously, each scenario you need to look at on an individual basis.
Okay.
So broadly speaking,
if you were going to test it, then how would you go about doing it? Would you do, would you try and turn pay-per-click on for one day and off the other day? Or is there another better way of actually testing to see whether it's worthwhile running both PPC and SEO for the same search term?
Yeah, well, we've done some experiments with brand, actually, recently, and it's interesting to see that running branded search queries is actually, it essentially steals traffic from your organic SERPs. Which is something that, at the end of the day, you could argue, well, why are you paying for that click when you could essentially get it for free? But like I say, if you're just A/B split testing purely on Google SERPs, then yeah, in terms of testing that, Yeah, it's not a bad way, maybe one day on, one day off. You might want a slightly longer time frame, potentially, and especially with the cycling trade, it's very, very seasonal. So you have to take that into account. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to do an A/B split test. For us, December is an incredibly busy time of the year, whereas January isn't. So I think you'd have to set that criteria so that you're comparing like for like.
In the split testing, or the testing that you've been doing, you said that you have seen a reduction in your organic traffic when you're bidding for that brand term. But have you found that the search traffic combined between organic traffic and paid traffic is still more than organic traffic when you have them both on together?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you start looking at assisted conversions as well. So it depends. Like say some sort of like high value items, they're unlikely to be a direct or last interaction. Generally, they might come through on a paid search ad, go away. They'll think about the purchase. They might then come back and click through in an organic. Maybe they come back again, and we might send them an email, and then that will be the final kind of push to get them over the edge, and they pull the trigger on buying the item. So I think, it's difficult just to give an exact stat, but broad brush, I would probably say it amounts to around about.
Okay, so it's not significantly better. So by and large, it's one visitor which is either going to click in your paid search or your organic listing. It's not someone who's, as maybe Google would argue, someone with a certain paid advertising mindset and only looking at them will click on that, and you'll get more traffic because of it. It's test and keep on testing, of course, and there's no cookie cutter approach, and based on your experience, it's not necessarily the same for every industry, but it is interesting to receive individual feedback like that, certainly. So one other thing that came to mind actually when you were saying that is attribution. Now you are so testing, trying to increase the quantity of people purchasing by driving people to email and maybe telling a different story by email as well. Are you actually attempting to offer some kind of percentage of overall purchase value to each step in the process, to attribute value to each step in the process?
There's lots of people kind of theorizing, and obviously you've got different attribution models that you can apply. For us at the moment, given the marketing budget that we've got, we're purely just looking at it in terms of pounds and pence ROI, i.e., okay, this month we spent this amount of money. Okay, how much revenue has that brought in? I think at the moment, for us to be able to attribute a value to that kind of interaction, I think that would be quite tricky, and it might be because we may stop looking at a particular channel just because it's not necessarily, it might have a significant effect on that transaction, or vice versa. Applying that model, giving each pass in that goal process. We might end up discounting a channel that has actually contributed. Like, for instance, social. Social isn't necessarily a massive revenue driver, but we know it's a key part in the process. We know that it is very good in terms of brand reputation, and also, in terms of actually building trust with our audience. But if we were to look at it in terms of assisted conversions, it's probably very weak. But it definitely
absolutely.
Has a
it's just challenging to actually define the financial value of these touch points in the middle, because traditionally it's either first click or most commonly last click is the model that businesses look at. And it's so easy to look at perhaps brand pay-per-click and think, let's pump as much as possible into that, because people are coming through our site last click, and 10 to 20 percentage of people are actually purchasing immediately from that, so it must be a great thing to do. But have people actually made up their mind to do that already? And it's really, really challenging, and especially because perhaps because paid advertising networks tend to be last click orientated, they don't want to assist you too much with the general analytics of actually helping you what really actually is impacting that purchase decision beforehand as well. So it needs to be an independent company that comes in there, but they'll have to charge significant amounts of money to do that. So not many smaller businesses will want to do that.
Absolutely, and I think as well, just obviously AdWords accounts for revenue slightly differently. It obviously puts it in the month in which the click was obtained, rather than when the purchase actually happened, which is what analytics does. So all of a sudden, when you're looking at month on month, okay, how much do I spend this month? How much do I spend, the month after? You do have to look at them in combination. And what you can find is you've got so much data. You just like, where do I begin? Where do I start? And I guess that's where potentially third-party analytics plugins are always potentially good to use as well. Don't just rely on using Google Analytics. There are other analytics platforms out there that you can get a slight take on the data.
Okay, so are there any other third-party analytics tools that you can recommend that actually don't rely on Google Analytics to feed its data?
For instance, we've been trying a little bit with not necessarily analytics, but obviously bringing social media back into it. Obviously, the new Facebook tracking pixels, so you can actually look at which conversions are being driven through your social, and that's really quite interesting because obviously that's not using necessarily Google Analytics data. That's using their own tracking pixel. Still early days, though. Still early days.
So does that mean that you're investing quite a bit in Facebook paid advertising at the moment?
In terms of the actual budgets, difficult for me to disclose, but it's definitely an area where we've seen quite a lot of traction. Obviously, with your messaging on it needs to be different. We find that things like competitions work incredibly well in terms of generating following, and I think it's that monetizing social media. I think to just look at social media and if you're looking at again just on pure ROI, so you're spending X amount of budget, it's not necessarily going to pull its weight in terms of revenue gained. I don't think yet, but we do find that the thing with Facebook is that you can really target people to the nth degree. We can say, right, target everybody who follows our page that's interested in cycling. Oh, and we'll also target their friends as well. The geo-targeting aspect of Facebook is incredibly powerful. So especially where we've got multiple stores across the country, it means that we can support our offline presence as well, much better. Definitely a platform. And it's interesting, I know we'll probably get on to talking about Facebook a little bit later with regards to their birthday that's just come up and their marketing campaign around that. It's just it's really interesting.
It's getting on a bit now. It's not a child anymore, just about.
Yeah, I think that means that Facebook advertising will only go one way.
Yeah, it's all about whether or not it can get more targeted and you can generate more ROI and justify paying more money for doing that. But of course, it all depends on whether or not you as a business can be most effective at using Facebook advertising, because it's easy to spend a lot of money at some kind of online advertising service without actually knowing how to optimize exactly what you're doing as well. So you need to become a specialist almost actually at advertising in that platform in order to actually really make the ROI that's required from it.
It's almost too easy to spend money with Facebook. It's literally as easy as putting a credit card in. But on a mobile device as well. So for us, especially when we're out at an event, if a post is getting some really, really good traction, then we can just be on our mobile devices, boost that post for a $5, and all of a sudden you've quadrupled the traction it would have normally got. And I think perhaps that's something that AdWords needs to move towards potentially. They've just brought out their app. I know we're talking about paid search again. Really. So.
It's easy to spend more money on Twitter as well, actually. I don't know if you've done a lot of Twitter advertising.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. It's on the
Twitter list. So we were talking about knowledge graphs there as well, and obviously, your focus, you work as digital marketing manager for Hargroves Cycles. So, can you see knowledge graphs actually impacting what you do, because it's affecting the travel industry quite a bit at the moment? You're semi-related to that as well. Do you have any concerns that your organic listings are going to get eaten up and
Maybe. I mean, a lot of what we do is product based rather than, you know, kind of that lifestyle holiday type thing. You know, holidays is not something that we offer. And I'd like to think that, you know, if somebody searched for things to do in Hampshire, we would pop up as, you know, visit one of our shops. But I don't think I don't think that would necessarily have the popularity. You know, well, in an ideal world, yes. But, potentially, you know, from an event side of things, that would be quite cool. You know, obviously we hold a lot of events throughout the year, and they're not just for, you know, hardcore cyclists. You know, they're very sort of family friendly as well. So yeah, potentially. What's kind of more interesting in terms of knowledge graph is the how-to stuff. And obviously, you know, about 6 months ago, there was a lot of hype in the industry with, you know, if you search, for instance, how to unblock a sync, Google would pull that information directly from, say, Wikipedia or an authority, and it would display it directly in SERPs. And how-to content, as well as buying guide content, is something that there's a phenomenal hunger for in our industry, and that's probably an area that we could capitalize on. You know, how to change a bike tire, how to change a cassette.
Can that traffic still come from regular organic listings? Because Google had a big clampdown a couple of years ago on big directory websites that just had 400, 500 word articles that were generic how to do this particular thing as well. Would you do a different type of optimization or a different type of content to actually try and rank for those kind of keyword phrases?
Yeah, I think we would. I think a lot of retailers, not just in the cycling industry, but we've seen it in retail, broadly speaking, it's kind of about creating these like knowledge hubs. So it's essentially blogs on steroids, isn't it? Where you've got really rich content, and it's not just text articles, it's things like image galleries, it's like video content, for instance, things like podcasts, actually pulling that stuff in. And it's more of, you know, if you're writing a blog post, you think, well, how can I make this different? You know, okay, what can we add in there? So yeah, I think when we create content, we want to create a piece of content that's useful to somebody in our industry. I suppose the tricky thing is, especially with me, I'm an enthusiast. So I might naturally write content that's perhaps of a more sort of expert level, whereas really we want to be writing stuff for beginners. So it's looking at those different, you know, levels of customer and writing content that's going to appeal to them. And you know, we've got, say, 5 or 6 different types of customer, all with different levels of knowledge. And the key thing is they're going to want to consume content in a different way. One person might prefer a video, another person might prefer an infographic. So you kind of, it's difficult, isn't it, to please everyone, but you kind of want to cover as many bases as possible. But also making sure that it's marked up correctly.
When you're thinking about actually producing these content hubs, as you describe them, would you be trying to actually get all this content on the one URL, or would you actually be wanting to create what's in effect an internal link wheel, or a wheel between different content, you know, within your own site? So you're kind of getting people to visit more pages on your own site as well, and get Google to crawl more pages in relation to the same content on your own site.
Yeah, I mean, we've opted for the kind of subdirectory, so /hub. And I know there's lots of other people that have gone down the subdomain route. So, for instance, you know, hub.cycleshop.com or whatever it might be. But yeah, we've decided just to go on that and keeping it all on the same domain, and also making sure that, you know, you've got cross sales between your content hub, but also the retail arm of your business. You want users to be able to flow easily from one to the other. I think that's a key thing that sometimes gets missed, is people just think, oh, I need blogs because I want to rank really, really well. And great, you've got a great piece of content, somebody's landed on it, but where's the call to action? Where's, you know, what's the next step after they've read the article? And you think sometimes
there are so many people blogging nowadays, you know, millions of people blogging, and probably even tens of thousands within your own industry. So you've got to find a way to actually differentiate what you do and the way you produce content, the quality of the content, the quantity, all, you know, in the whole process behind who you actually reach out to, hopefully, before publishing that content, and how that content is marketed after as well. I don't think it's possible or likely for a blog to actually start off now and just keep on publishing articles, not thinking about marketing what they do and be a success doing that. Is that your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that a lot of bloggers that I speak to have been scared by Google. We sort of talked to them about doing some, guest posting, editorial, advertorial, and they're really, really insistent on marking it up as a sponsored post. There are no follow links. Putting sponsored post in the post title, even on the meta descriptions. Really sort of laying on the fact it's a sponsored post. And I think, people want to advertise, and that's just a fact of life. And it's kind of like, I think bloggers have been a bit scared really about getting content from other people. And to be fair, even content that we don't necessarily, not looking to pay to place, just content from a third party. They just want Google to know that it's not theirs. And I just think, well, how is that different to a news site, for instance? Content gets recycled all the time, it gets reused, it gets repurposed. So I'd like to see maybe a bit of a change of that, and for the industry to sort of be less scared about having guest posts, guest editorial. Obviously, on a wide scale, paying peanuts to host it on every site out there. That's a bad approach. I'm not saying that that's what people want to be doing with their SEO at all. But yeah,
it's. I mean, the traditional way of doing blogger outreach has been to simply contact people and say, we can write some content for you. Can we get some? Can we publish an article, a free article on your website here? All we want is 2 links back, and that is an old horrible approach that shouldn't be continued really. But everyone wants to consume decent content online. And everyone understands that most businesses try to make a profit, and consumers aren't daft as well. So they're quite good at seeing through bloggers that are just writing something to promote something, and bloggers who actually talk about something that they actually believe in as well. So you need to just build a wonderful product and service, and build relationships with people, and reach out to them for their opinion of what you do, and make them feel that their opinion is really valued as well. And slowly but surely they'll start talking about you. It's unfortunately not really a short-term thing.
No, I agree. I'm a massive advocate for being controversial. So if you can say something that's going to generate a bit of controversy, then that tends to get lots.
So what's an example of something controversial that you've done?
Well, not necessarily me, but I don't know. I mean, in the cycling industry, someone at a World Cup race had an electric motor in their bike, and it's called motor doping. And that sort of stuff doesn't come along every day, and everyone's kind of
it's a good hashtag
talking
anyway.
about it. Someone's at motor doping. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly that. I've lost count of the amount of emails I've had saying automation is the future of marketing, and it's like, well, yeah, it might be. But,
automation is also the past of marketing as well. You just have to make sure you automate the right things and doing it in the right manner.
Yeah, exactly. I think as marketers, we're kind of sometimes we get too focused on trying to make everything as easy as possible, and actually just thinking, well, it's gonna be hard work, but if we just we'll do it, we'll get some good results.
People can tell if you're sending it. If people can tell if you're sending out a mass email to everyone, or if you've actually taken time to reply to them personally as well. No matter how hard you try to automate things, it's obvious which one is each. Yeah. So another topic that we're actually going to move on to is Google is now supporting JSON-LD for reviews and product structured data markup. So this is a different way of structuring data compared with microdata. But is it better? It's certainly a little bit different. I mean, the way that JSON-LD works is it's JavaScript basically. So it means it can be placed in the head section of a web page, for instance. So it doesn't actually have to be actually on the same line as a traditional piece of microdata. So this could actually be a more effective approach. It's perhaps helping search engines get clear of markup within content as well. Perhaps it means it's an easier way to actually mark up your whole website rather than actually quite a few pages individually, painstakingly, that you'd have to go back and do. What are your initial thoughts on this one, Matt?
So a couple of things really, and this is a topic that's of massive interest at the moment. I first saw the kind of JSON integration at Brighton SEO last year, and back then it didn't support product or reviews. So for that was a bit of a non-starter for me, because I wanted to start getting those review styles in the organic SERPs. I think there's two key considerations. One being speed. So I guess because it's JavaScript based, it shouldn't have too much effect on your site speed. But also depends on what platform you're on. So we're on a Magento platform. And anyone familiar with Magento will know that it's a very hungry resource beast, but also the template files can be pretty colossal. So to use something like a script, it would essentially save us having to go into each individual template and mark up the different sections. But interestingly, I was using Google's data highlighter tool a couple of days ago, and whilst it's amazing because you can basically essentially yellow pen, digitally speaking, you can yellow pen different areas of a product page and then mark it up. There's some aspects on the page that I can't mark up. Google can't recognize it because of the way that the page has been coded. So that's kind of a non-starter for me again. So because there's a Magento plugin for JSON, it could be potentially, it could solve all my woes. It could solve all my life problems.
I don't like the sound of using Google's highlighter tool. And I've, I think it came out about 3 years ago or so, and it looks interesting, but I don't like doing something that's intended it's just one search engine. And is it possible for other search engines to actually see that data as well? You want to make sure that other search engines in the future can actually view that information as well. And in the future, a lot of people acknowledge that perhaps people are going to be using search on their phones more often there. That's not necessarily going to involve Google, and maybe Siri or other search engines like that may require the markup in a manner that they will understand and support as well.
Yeah, do you know if it's is JSON is it universal in that respect then? So would it cover off the other search engines, do you think, or is that
it's certainly intended to do that? I believe schema.org is probably the one that's supported by most at the moment, certainly. But it certainly looks like JSON-LD is potentially one for the future, because it seems easier to implement on existing content that actually hasn't been marked up completely across the whole site.
Yeah. It's interesting actually with the data highlighter tool. One thing that I've learned just through trial and error really is that it loads the page dynamically in the tool. But if you've got reviews or you've got drop-down options on a product page, it can't physically interact with a drop-down. So if you've got SKUs hidden in the drop-down, then you can't mark up that SKU as a product identifier on the page. So I think, to be honest, the data highlighter, it works with sort of very simply structured pages where you haven't got any dynamic. If you've got accordions or you've got tabs, then you've got no chance.
By the way, you mentioned Brighton SEO there. I need to give an exclusive here, and we're as in authoritas.com. Which is our new brand for big data powered content marketing. We're actually going to be the broadcast sponsor for Brighton SEO. So we're going to be broadcasting Brighton SEO in April completely live, free of charge, on our own website. So the whole main stage, the whole day. So just go to authoritas.com/Brighton SEO, and you can actually sign up to watch Brighton SEO live if you can't make it to Brighton. Obviously, it's better to make it in person, but if you can't, then that's a good way to see it. Yeah, but you're from the South Coast. You've been along there in person a few times, haven't you, Matt?
Yeah, I have. And the guy that organises it, Kelvin, absolute top chap. And I've never had a bad experience at Brighton. I've always come away similar to this show, really, knowing a little bit more about digital marketing.
It's all about that incremental learning. You're just picking things up bit by bit. Yes,
incremental gains.
Absolutely, yeah. So, do you know much about like schema.org? Have you used that markup in the past as well?
Yeah, just kind of dabbled with it. I'm not a hardcore coder by any stretch. I've always had the luxury of being able to work closely with a developer that knows more about coding than I do. But yeah, it's one of those things actually that I wish I used more, especially because you see, other competitors using it so well, which is kind of a position I wouldn't mind being in. It's always good to strive to be better. So in terms of kind of real world application, like I said, this JSON-LD thing is something that we're going to be exploring, and so hopefully in a month or so I'll be able to report back and say, yeah, this is the way forward. So that's kind of where I'm
you
at
have
with
to
kind of scheming.
come back on here then in a month's time. That's a date, and you'll have to tell us exactly how it's gone. No pressure.
Yeah, deal. No pressure. Yeah.
Good.
Good.
Well, I mean, it's you mentioned you see some competitors doing it well, but I'm sure there are some competitors not doing it well at all. And you've got to give Google and other search engines the best chance of understanding exactly what your website's about. So if you're not using any kind of markup at all, and you're in a fairly competitive industry, tell Google what industry you're in and what your products are about by markup, and surely that will give you a better opportunity to for Google to be more confident at consuming your data, really.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as well a lot of webmasters out there, anyone using WordPress obviously potentially gets the luxury of having some of that schema already built in, so they don't even know they've got it on their site. It's just there by default.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you get everything up to date, it's a really effective CMS certainly as well. But we've got a couple of more topics here. So one of them was a guy called Charles Deering has written an article on marketinginsidergroup.com. The article was called "Common Misconceptions About SEO That Won't Die." But what are those misconceptions, and do we both agree? So the first one was meta tags and descriptions are important for search engines. Now, I've got a bit of a gripe with this one because although most SEOs are comfortable in the fact that the meta description isn't thought to be within Google's algorithm, it can significantly impact click-through rate from a search result. And that will, the click-through is thought to be a signal, and also the user experience after that when people land on your site obviously is thought to be as well. So meta description isn't necessarily, or it's highly unlikely to be a part of Google's core algorithm, but it can impact Google's ranking, from what a user does. So I don't like to say it's not part of Google's algorithm because of that. What are your thoughts on that one, Matt?
Yeah, I still think they have a place. Absolutely. I don't know if you can class the microdata as kind of metadata, but if you've got it marked up correctly, then you'll start to see that populating just above or below.
Yeah, you can start to see things like where Google sees appropriate. Google adding little icons of images beside your search result there as well. And tiny little bits of. The classic example is recipes and cooking, and you can see cooking time. But depending on what industry you're in, there are so many different elements of microdata that you can add to your site and give Google a chance to actually list it there as well. The more interesting information in relation to your site result will surely make it more likely for people to click through. So meta description, describing what your site is about, and microdata probably go hand in hand there.
Yeah, I think so. I think the worst thing that people can do is to try and maximize the amount of characters in a meta description because they're there. That's something that I saw a lot, and actually it's kind of flipping on its head, especially with mobile devices as well, because obviously those character and pixel limits, they change. And to be fair, when we're writing our metadata, and I still think page titles have a massive bearing on ranking, we're really mindful of those character limits. We generally write them, kind of around 50 characters now, generally speaking, so that because mobile is such a massive player, you want it to look good. You want people to be able to read exactly what that page is.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant tip there. in 2014, Google increased the pixel size of its font that it used in its search results. So previously, I mean, it's the same pixel width that those search results are appearing in if you're looking at it on a desktop. But where it meant that previously the width or the number of characters within a search result title could be up to about 66 or even 67 characters. Now, only about 50 characters is likely to guarantee you that every character is going to be listed in there as well. So, yeah, 50 is a great number to aim for with that as well. Meta descriptions are thought to be about 155, maybe just over that in terms of maximum amount as well. And a good tip that you can go slightly less than that as well, because if you want to fill up the whole meta description, you're probably not getting the best call to action in there as well. So if you can say it in 140 characters or something like that, and say it more succinctly and make it more likely for people to click on that result because of it, that's a better meta description. So great tip there as well. I'd be a little bit concerned about it going too short, maybe shorter than 100 or so characters meta description, because maybe Google might think that it's not enough as a description, and they might want to take text from the rest of a page instead of actually displaying your desired meta description. Have you got any thoughts on, is it possible to go too short in terms of meta description?
Do you know what? It's not something I've tried, but I might have a project that I might be able to test something on, which would be quite interesting. I'd like to see. Yeah, I'd like to A/B split test that. Maybe create two sort of similar pages. If anyone's got a situation where cannibalization, it's terrible things happen, and I'd hate for a site to have kind of mass cannibalization. But if anyone out there's got two pages that are competing for the same term, I'd be quite interested to maybe see. And they're not too worried about if those pages fall off page one. I don't want anyone to go out of business overnight. But it'd be interesting to see, what sort of change that might have on ranking. If you were to maybe have one really, really short meta.
That would
slightly longer ones.
Interesting.
But in terms of the length of the meta description, sometimes I did do a couple of trials where I put the call to action first, and that was quite interesting. Did actually see slightly higher click-through rate, but nothing conclusive. I couldn't empirically say yes. Short descriptions are a good or a bad thing as of yet. But
that would be a lovely study. I haven't looked into it in terms of carrying out proper research, but my thinking is that perhaps in between 120 and 155 characters is a good length. But if it gets too short, then Google may be less likely to want to actually use that meta description and just take some text from the rest of your site. So it would be good to actually do some research into that to see if that's likely to be the case.
So yeah, absolutely. I wonder, it would probably need to be tested on a page that's got a fair amount of authority. Would you agree? Because I guess you'd need something that Google.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you'd need a decent amount of data, certainly, absolutely, as well. A decent amount of traffic to that. But it would be possible to do that. Obviously, you'd want to try and make it examples that were fairly similar, apart from the meta description, and not have anything else that could impact the actual click through as well. And it's tough to do that, certainly, when you're just talking about organic tests.
Yeah, cool. Well, if there's anyone out there that fancies having a little trial, let us know.
Another mention in this article is focusing on high search volume keywords will help achieve success. So it used to be in the past, 7-10 years ago, that you would pick high volume keyword phrases because there wasn't that much competition out there, and you could fairly easily, through submitting articles, getting links in our author bios or whatever, get links that would actually give you that ranking for that competitive keyword phrase. Now it's certainly very, very difficult to target competitive keyword phrases, say keyword phrases with more than 1,000 searches per month, because you've got so many competitors out there that have already defined those keywords. I agree with this point. I think the opportunity is in the long tail. There's a lot of keywords that are opportunities and aren't even highlighted by Google's keyword research tool because people aren't using them commercially at the moment, but it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily good terms to bring valuable traffic. I see you nodding away, Matt. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree, especially where you work in an industry such as retail, where you know a product's coming out, but obviously there's no demand for it yet. You know, the manufacturer hasn't released it, so therefore people aren't really searching for that. So if you were to put that keyword into Google's keyword planner, it's going to tell you it's a rubbish keyword based on search volume. But obviously you know that this incredible product is going to be hitting the market soon. So actually, why don't you start optimizing
absolutely.
for it now?
So we agree on that one there. Next.
I think so. Yeah, I do. Although I would say one thing, and you know, I think it's really important to look at the sales funnel, and that's something as marketeers we should be always looking at. And it's, you know, you could just focus on the words that drive traffic, but you could run the risk of just fishing in the same pond all of the time. And obviously, each keyword is going to top out at some point. And for, you know, to keep the longevity of your rankings, but also you should always be trying to look for new customers. And so sometimes it's about putting a little bit more at the top of the funnel, and you might have to look further afield. You might have to go to slightly different industries. Is there differentiation? You know, having a look and just trying to sort of broaden. And with paid search as well, a lot of them I don't focus on exact match keywords. I use broad match modify, because when you actually look at data for the last month, if I was to target all of those long tail keywords, I'd be there forever. Like, there's no way that you could, you know, cover those off. So I don't know. Yeah, I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
And another point is having a good amount of links will boost your rankings. Links are still fairly integral to Google's algorithm, but obviously it depends on the quality of the link, how it's come about, the positioning of it, you know, what kind of neighborhoods your links are lying in. What are your thoughts on links, Matt?
Yeah, it's got to be quality over quantity, and that's probably a phrase that gets used far too much. But I think links are still the lifeblood of Google, and the majority of search engines out there. When I was working agency side, we worked on one project where the only thing we changed was the anchor text in the backlinks. And we changed the anchor text of about 40 sites linking to this particular site. And I kid you not, within about 10 days or so, maybe a little bit more, we started seeing the website rank for terms that they used to be on the first page for, you know, a couple of years ago, lost the rankings. And just by changing that anchor text on those backlinks to some of it was long tail, some of it was, you know, broad match, shorter tail stuff. And yeah, you know, we didn't change anything else. And for me, that was an interesting experiment, because for me, that demonstrated the importance of anchor text in backlinks, but also just the power that backlink can have. But obviously, the sites that were linking to this particular site were really, really authoritative. And I think that's a massive part of it as well. If you were to change the anchor text of a load of sites that, you know, had no authority whatsoever, I don't think it would have got the same traction, you could argue. But yeah, I do still think links are because I think if you had a site that had no links but great content, why would Google want to rank that? It's got no votes. It's got no votes from any other websites out there. So content, yes, has a part to play as well, has a massive part to play. But I don't think you can have one without the other.
Yeah,
I think you have that
absolutely. And you're talking about anchor text on third-party sites that you had control of. You're not talking about changing anchor text within your own site there.
Oh, correct. Yeah, sorry. So it was the anchor text on other sites linking.
Okay,
to this particular
intriguing.
site.
Some may think that changing anchor text on existing links, on existing pages that Google already know about, may be alerting Google to the fact that you're actively doing SEO. So Google may be more likely to, you know, scrutinize what you do closer. Would you have any concerns about doing that too much?
Yeah, I think it needs a bit of a spam check. You know, I think Google, expects sites to change, and it also depends on, are you changing? Obviously, it's gonna look, isn't it? It's gonna look at the link. It's gonna look at the text in the anchor link versus what your page is about. So if there's a good correlation between the two, then even if you've changed it, I think that's fine because there's still a strong relationship. I think you might get into trouble if you've changed the anchor text and it's pointing to a page that's talking about something completely different, and you're just trying to influence the rankings for a particular keyword. Then yeah, that would probably shout out, and I would expect Google to frown upon that. But let's say, for instance, you've got a load of bloggers that are linking to a page that's no longer there. You might want to say to them, hey, can you update your backlink because this article is no longer there? Can we update it to this new page? Oh, and by the way, whilst you're there, can we just change this anchor text so it's still relevant, but you might want to change the wording of it. You might want to make it slightly longer tail. So far, I've not seen any problems with doing that. But this is Google. It could throw its toys out the pram anytime.
So I guess we should move on to our last subject, actually, and that's Facebook have announced that it's now 3.57 degrees of separation, not 6 degrees of separation as previously thought. So apparently, if you pick any two Facebook users, it's been calculated that there's an average of 3.57 degrees of separation between them. I'm not sure if this is bringing people closer together or if this is simply a matter of fact of people are adding thousands of friends that they actually don't know personally. So in theory, your friends are more likely to know friends of other people, but are they real friends? Or am I being too cynical here about the way that people maybe add friends crazily on Facebook?
Yeah, well, potentially. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think it's always to have a slightly cynical bit there. I sort of looked at that, actually, it's quite a cool Facebook campaign in terms of a marketing campaign, because it is their birthday. They could have just said, hey, it's our birthday. We make loads of money. But actually, I think we as marketers can learn quite a bit from that because A, it's got that piece of content. It's got global appeal. It's interesting. And it kind of applies to most people that use Facebook. It's, I think good content is something, that should tell somebody something they don't already know. And that, I just thought, wow, I did wonder how I could be linked to Mark Zuckerberg in just two people. I'm still trying to work that one out.
I mean, it's, the other thing that I like about the campaign is the fact that they referred back to something which is a previous known and people can relate to. Most people know of 6 degrees of separation there as well. So the fact that it's changed is maybe a big announcement for most people as well. If they picked a story that was interesting but not relatable to something else in someone's head, then maybe it's less likely to get that passionate response on social media and that sharing. So I think that's been done very well, and I think that's a good point that you made, that the thing to learn here is not the actual result that Facebook are talking about. It's actually the way they went about things and what can we learn in terms of doing PR and integrating it with marketing and SEO from Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we already touched on the fact that I think it's a given that Facebook advertising, I mean, from an advertiser, you look at that and think, oh, great. So, my reach as an advertiser is going to, take a positive step forward. But yeah, I think Facebook advertising is going to get more expensive. And they've already started doing clever little things like, you set a campaign and it will say the minimum budget is £7. You have to spend at least this, which I think is a little bit cheeky. But absolutely. I suppose they're in it to make money, aren't they?
I mean, it certainly doesn't get away from the fact that you still have to build personal relationships in order to actually really move your business forward as well. Just because you've got thousands of friends or followers or contacts, you can't necessarily just message them in a general message sense and expect them to give you the same kind of reaction as that one-to-one relationship would do as well. And I just didn't want people to start thinking that okay, we're so close to that person now, that means I can actually reach out to them. Let's just send a blanket email to a few people like that, which I didn't like the feeling of doing, because it's a bit spammy, and I think some marketers could actually take the wrong approach from hearing that and thinking, well, I can quite easily reach out to so many different people as well. But if you do as you suggest, and actually just learn from it as a good piece of PR, then that's probably the best takeaway to take from it.
Yeah, I think so, especially with a lot of small businesses as well. I spoke to a couple, just recently, just friends of mine that own businesses, and they sort of read stuff online, like Twitter. Okay, Twitter must be the next best thing for me to promote my business. And, in order to be good at Twitter, you've got to be right. You've got to be doing 10 posts a day. You've got to be following X amount of people, and you've got to follow your competitors' followers. And I just thought, well, yeah, potentially, but there might be other more effective channels that you can use that are going to give you more of an impact, and it's going to require less resource, because I think that's the ultimate denominating factor for a lot of businesses, is that there's so much stuff you could be doing. Sometimes you have to just prioritize and think, right, okay, where is my effort going to be best spent? And it doesn't help really, because a lot of these social channels, they're sort of marketing really heavily to these smaller businesses that don't necessarily know better. They haven't had the experience of, agencies being able to work with lots and lots of different clients, trying lots of different strategies. And sometimes it's easy, isn't it, to kind of just get pulled along with this massive wave of let's jump on the social media bandwagon. And yeah, so just
that's good. There. I think I had one just before as well, so that's all right. So I reckon that takes us just about to the end of today's show. So maybe just time for a single takeaway in terms of actually of what we've discussed today. What do you think people should particularly go away and think about?
Crikey. There's been so many different things we touched on today. I think the standout thing for me would be to, if you're not using the schema, then give it a go. I'm certainly going to be doing it over the next couple of weeks, and definitely in terms of SEO benefit. I think you could potentially reap quite a lot of rewards with that.
Yeah, good advice. In terms of my thoughts and discussion, the meta description focus is probably what a lot of businesses don't do well. Perhaps businesses do their homepage well, but of course, you need to have that distinct meta description for every single page on your site. So I think it's worthwhile to take some time to really think about actually what your SERP listing really looks like in terms of that description underneath the title. Is it too long? Do you see these ellipses after it, and does it actually make a call to action sense for users that you want to drive to your website? So meta descriptions revisited is probably where I'll go. So Matt, was wonderful having you on today. Where's the best place for people to find out more about you and what you do?
Either Twitter or LinkedIn at Matthew Treviss. That's TREVISS.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll make sure there's links to that from the show notes as well, so that in case there's any people that can't spell, then there's no excuse but to go and find out more about you from there. And of course, if you want to watch the replay, for me, as part of the live show, you're cutting out just a little bit there. So, we still understood the context of everything that you were saying there. But in terms of the replay version, we will have perfect audio. We could do that through the Zencaster software that we're using on your computer there as well. So as long as if I stop that and edit it okay afterwards, then we'll have great audio for the replay. So check out that as well afterwards. But I'm David Bain, Head of Growth at Authoritas, providing big data solutions that give your enterprise the content marketing edge. Sign up for a demo of our platform at authoritas.com. And you can also find me interviewing online marketing gurus over at digitalmarketingradio.com. So if you're watching the show as a replay, remember to watch the next show live. Head over to thisweekinorganic.com to be part of the live audience for the next show. And of course, if you want to go and check out the previous episodes, you can do that as well. Thisweekinorganic.com is the best place to do that. You'll receive the link to the podcast from there. But until we see you again, have a fantabulous weekend, and thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, Matt. Great to have you on.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.